Steve, I think we're ready for you to start. If you're ready to start.
Yeah, let's start. And I suppose I should share my screen.
Yeah, you can share your screen. And I'm going to mute myself. If you need me,
Okay.
let me know. I'm just going to say this. I might leave a little early because I just discovered today or a little while ago that my eye is like all bloody red if I lift my eyelid, and I don't know why that is. So I might run to the doctor around 6:30. So, just FYI.
Okay. Well, kudos to CEMTF. It's my very great honor to present. And I think this presentation matches with some of the other CEMTF events, including July's preparedness event and the past and future Indigenous leadership events and next year's agroecology event. And apologies in advance, but this presentation is just super dense with content. So the title is Degrow the Bay Area 95%. So that means shrink the gross domestic product, energy consumption, and greenhouse gas while increasing happiness and equity. And I'm just kind of a schmo. I'm trying to do a journalist level synthesis of 20 degrowthy thinkers. I've got a slide on the next slide about them, who are really innovative and interesting. Um, and my slides can be accessed by that bit.ly link there. And I've tried to put some details in the speaker notes. So we can think of degrowth as luxury communism with austerity for the rich. And typically degrowth presentations are either kind of positive messaging or harsh reality. And I'm doing the harsh reality version. People ask, why cut the economy and greenhouse gas 95%? For a just transition, the global north needs to come down to the per capita energy use of the global south. That would be just. And cutting by 95% is the rational and economically conservative thing to do. And the status quo is just radically harmful, amazingly so. So there's three parts to this talk. There's most of the content is in the preface, the reason being that our political economy doesn't provide concepts or vocabulary to imagine a better future. And then after that, talk about how to bring about the political movement and then the policies and techniques. So here are the 20 thinkers, and I'll bring them up at the end as well. So they all are kind of on the same page, sometimes with different vocabulary. Now, the first preface concept is future scenarios, and there are six categories. And the first three I'm showing here, stasis, which most people live in thinking tomorrow is like today, and authoritarian, and even people who sort of are predicting we're going to go authoritarian don't necessarily take any big steps in anticipation of that. And then for techno futures, there's utopias and dystopias depending upon how AI turns out. But the point being, if you've got a hunch that one of these particular scenarios is going to happen, then you can modify your education, career, location, and life choices, and you can come out better than those people who think that tomorrow is going to be like today. And then for the next three categories of future scenarios, degrowth really works in all three. So ideally, we have a managed transition and orderly transition with degrowth. But our thinkers are thinking that it's more likely that collapse is going to hit, which is involuntary degrowth. But the more degrowth we do now, the less suffering we'll have. And then for spiritual transformation and transcendence, we always like to link degrowth with indigenous wisdom and post-material values. Next preface concept is our political economy, which is predatory, extractive, racial, colonial capitalism, or PERC. And PERC is really great at innovation and military might. The US is the world's hegemon of PERC. And even if you don't like our foreign policy, it's not clear if other countries would have a better foreign policy if they were the hegemon. And one of the thinkers believes that biological evolution is such that because of the survival of the fittest, we will always evolve into perk. So perk is great for innovation, but it's irrational and self-destructive. And perk doesn't work without continuous growth, which is stupid. And since the first big climate assessment in 1990, annual gigatons of carbon have gone up from 22 to 33 per year. And that is completely irrational and self-destructive. And no rational political economy would ever do something like that. The top IPC scientists are forecasting about 3C by year 2100, which would be completely disastrous. And those scientists, 82% predict catastrophic impacts in their lifetime, and 60% have mental health issues associated with climate. And our thinkers claim that PERC will never seriously address climate. Another preface concept is crunk, that PERC allows people to amass vast amounts of power and wealth. And that brings out the worst characteristics: cruel, ruthless, unempathetic, narcissistic, and conscience free. But if you took Trump and put him into a better political economy, he might be a pretty fun guy to hang out with. So the point being is that the system is really bad and brings out the worst. And it's not clear if people are always going to be bad. Now, the antidote for PERC is IPEC, Indigenous Participatory Eco-Collectivism. And IPEC looks at PERC with astonishment for cruel animal agriculture, nuclear weapons, phone scams, homelessness, and just can't understand it. And I've got 5 examples of IPEC communities, including the Zapatistas. And IPEC was founded about 1,000 years ago. And there's this core philosophy that gives nature rights that is the best starting place that we need right now. Another preface concept is the notion not, we don't just have climate change, but we've got about 60 wicked problems that are caused by PERC, including refugees, white supremacy, inequality, fake news, hate crimes, and species extinction. And IPEC is a great antidote to these wicked problems. And also be wary that some people want you to just fix the climate and leave the rest of the wicked problems alone. Now, we can compare irrational perk versus wise IPEC on a number of different dimensions, and typically IPEC is going to win. So for food, uh, perk food is carbon intensive, it's unhealthy, and IPEC is the opposite. Clothes are fast fashion and perk and carbon intensive, and IPEC clothes are sturdy and made locally. For shelter, perk has homelessness and wasteful mansions, whereas IPEC would have the same square foot per capita and a small energy efficient footprint. And with PERC, if you're poor and you miss a rent payment, then you can spiral into homelessness. Whereas IPEC, thriftiness is just a way of life and everybody's at the same level. With PERC, for mental health, young men become isolated and become mass shooters, whereas in IPEC, everybody belongs to the community. As far as employment, PERC has unemployment and IPEC has full employment and shorter work week. So everything that irritates you about PERC is typically comes out better with IPEC. So you can create a very long table with these kind of comparisons. Now, the next preface concept is what's going to happen in the near future. And our thinkers imagine kind of a dystopian sort of thing, worsening change each year, wars over scarce resources like water, millions of refugees, less democracy. And here's a complex preface concept as well, in that I think you'll agree that we would love to see a cross-disciplinary plan to keep below 2 degrees C global warming, or hopefully 1.5 C. And there's one human who's taken a stab at this in a climate fiction book, Kim Stanley Robinson in The Ministry for the Future. And a quick synopsis is that there's a 2-week heat dome in India that kills 20 million people, and that causes eco-terrorism to arise in the form of the children of the Kali. And they assassinate petroleum CEOs. They use drones to take down planes to stop airplane travel. They use bioterrorism to foul the meat market. and they take billionaires hostages at the Davos conference. In addition, a depression arises, and that sort of helps things shrink and reduce greenhouse gas footprint. And Robinson also looks at designing a better social system. So he caps CEO pay. He adopts IPEC agroecology and government. And then he's got this social media platform that replaces the bad social media platform. So we get back to facts and shared truth. And interestingly, US policy lags in his book, but finally, because of big disasters in Los Angeles and Arizona, policy begins to change. So this is a very comprehensive cross-disciplinary plan, but is it credible? The answer is no. And in fact, Robinson would say, well, he's not really a fan of political violence, but if you're an author, it makes for great storytelling to add the political violence. But Robinson intellectually has created this template that we can use and come up with better plans. Also thinking about these plans are the Real Post-Growth Deal Project at the Barcelona Autonomous University. And the European government actually funds this research, unlike the US, and tends to be a little bit more community focused rather than regional. So this is this great project that's ongoing for the next, I think, 4 or 5 years. And for this particular slide deck, we're thinking about degrowing the Bay Area 95%. And you'll note at the end that what I'm saying about the political movement, you probably won't think it's very credible. And you really don't want one person working on a plan for the Bay Area. You'd like to get all the nonprofits involved and government and UC Berkeley. But note that University of California is not going to provide permission because they don't want to piss off their perk donors. So that's really what's needed is a larger planning effort. This is just sort of a template I'm showing in this deck here. So that comes to the end of our long-winded preface. Just to summarize, degrowth works for managed transition and collapse scenarios. PERC is provably self-destructive. IPEC fixes PERC's wicked problems. PERC brings out the crunk in leaders. IPEC doesn't. Our probable near future is dystopian. We need these cross-disciplinary plans to stay below 2C that address political movements, social media, fake news. Gave a couple examples of innovative projects. And now we're going to go on to the political movement to degrow 95% of the Bay Area. And that's the hard one. And then we'll also cover policies, methods, and techniques. So split the political transformation into 8 years. And years 1 through 4 spend a lot of time in communication, stigmatizing PERC. But a problem is that so many Americans love consumerism. It's a really tough communications battle to win. Definitely can exploit disasters and recessions and bad things that happen because of PERC. And while this is going on, we build manual labor skills, direct action skills, so we stay out of jail, wisdom and education, so we understand PERC versus IPEC. We adopt policies to restrict high carbon activities. And then we want to pioneer communities of maybe a size 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people to do best practices for degrowing. And in the July preparedness event, talked about resilience hubs, block-based approaches, and mutual aid, and just trying to grow and scale those kinds of efforts and even cut greenhouse gas larger. And we typically want a guaranteed minimum income. And so at the end of 4 years, you end up with the best possible version of PERC, which is still lousy. So we need to go the next step. And there's a theory behind this political transformation, which is from Erica Chenoweth's Why Civil Resistance Works. And if we get 3% of the Bay Area population, about 300,000 residents, then we have a 50% chance to replace the government. And Chenoweth lists effective tactics as having fun, festival-like rallies and demonstrations, humor and satire. You can win over the children who then shame their parents. Courage breeds courage. Once you see your friends out on the street, you join them. Take advantage of government overreaction. And this theory, unfortunately, does not apply to the US. It applies to smaller countries, but certainly the Bay Area is the right size population for this apply to. But we typically think of the smaller countries with single big, huge cities in them as good places to target with this theory. Okay, so years 5 through 8 of the political transformation, we have a voter referendum to enact a federal indigenous treaty. So this is a great mechanism to achieve sovereignty from the federal government. And of course, this land was stolen originally, so it needs to be reclaimed. And the offer to the federal government is that we'll push out the tech companies and the wealth, and they'll all move to Texas. So the rest of the US will get even more perk. And then the Bay Area will be allowed to degrow. And to implement IPEC, we want to eliminate most of private property. And we want to recruit the wise people from IPEC communities, especially those in the equator where it's going to be a little too hot. So that is the political movement story. And then I'd argue that the policies, methods, and technologies, there's a plethora of them to pick from to cut 95%. So we want to strive for sufficiency, which means just having enough food, clothing, and shelter, and then focusing on our life satisfaction. So that's the 4 focus areas. So we take 21% of Bay Area land and put it into food production. We cover suburbia with compost, making it a lost civilization, abandoning half of our cities. Office workers shifts jobs to more manual labor, food, gray water, compost, renewable energy. By freezing the built environment, that means don't build any new buildings with new materials, but you can tear down buildings and recycle those materials and use those to build with. Squeeze more people into the remaining housing and into the abandoned offices, while we'll increase community space, locate jobs and activities within a 5-mile e-bike ride, exploit electric trolleybuses for longer journeys, convert most streets to bike only or food production, retire server farms for AI and blockchain and even some streaming video, eliminate packaging, plastic, and planned obsolescence, focus more on shade than on cranking up the AC, get used to a wider temperature, take fewer showers. So this is just radical change that not many people in the Bay Area are looking for. It's rational from compared to collapse. And there's going to be some demodernization. It's not clear how much. It takes some ingenuity to come up with sort of the best mix of what parts of modernity to keep. But this is far less bad than collapse. And I'm highlighting books like The Parable of the Sower and The Water Knife, which illustrate collapse. And so compared to those collapse scenarios, then this radical change in lifestyle is better. So there are tens of sources to pick from to degrow by 95%. Just switching from e-bikes to cars is a great thing to do. There's an example of putting a chicken in your backyard, getting an egg, as opposed to going to the store for one. That's much more efficient. You know, in essence, just localizing our supply chains and not having irrational international supply chains really cuts a lot of carbon out. And again, there's a lot of great thinkers. And with that, that was a very dense explanation of how to degrow the Bay Area at 95%. Thanks.
Woo!
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm sure people have some questions. Do you want to raise your hand if you have any questions? Armando, you have any questions?
Um, I don't know. That was great. I really loved your presentation, the way you put it together, and the kind of aesthetic choices you made. And also, thanks for sharing it because I downloaded. I've been downloading everyone's decks that I can find and putting them in Canva to see like.
Well, and I'd also recommend for some of the very wise people in
Hmm.
this list to kind of just riff and respond and take that presentation somewhere rather than just don't think you have to ask a question.
Yeah. Um, yeah. The thing I've been thinking
Yeah.
about.
Francisca has Armando.
Yeah. I'm just gonna make a comment. Like the thing, because we're all presenting on Friday, and the thing I've been trying to like articulate is, and I wonder what you think about this, because you like offered a theory of change, but I feel like the culture in the Bay Area and in the California in general, like kind of like upper class, liberal minded people don't want a lot of change. And especially as folks are getting older, and I feel like the calculus has continually been like sustainability up to a point. But degrowth is asking us to complete the job and like the kind of like, you know, so I don't know how much to like focus on the like I don't quite have the narrative right, like the quality of life enhancements of like localizing, spending more time with people, slowing down the economy, da, 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 versus the like loss of privilege to just like spend as much as you want on whatever you want and kind of like just continue to take more than our fair share of the earth's resources. And because I feel like that like kind of NIMBY, I don't want any kind of change no matter who it's for attitude in California is like really intense. In addition to like the kind of like corporate capture of the state. And so there's like these like are like big obstacles. And I feel like just this last comment, but I feel like one of the big mind-blowing shifts was like I feel like having grown up in California and even being in the environmental world, they very cleverly like kept capitalism like kept like capitalism outside of the discussion, and we're like we'll be sustainable without addressing capitalism and more than the earth like consuming more than we deserve. And I'm just like ooh, like that part is going to be hard to figure out. So I don't know, I'm curious if you have any like comments or thoughts.
Oh yeah, I mean it's so sad that there's absolutely no compassion for people in the global south, and nobody cares. But I also think that my kind of a harsh reality presentation, I think a lot of people in degrowth movement do want to focus on positive and palatable, and they're really worried about turning people off. So that's something in messaging that I think we're wrestling with, you know, truth versus just kind of sliding it in. Um, as far as theory of change, what about the most progressive Bay Area cities like Petaluma, Berkeley, and Oakland? Are they better and more? Is there more opportunity there than like Los Altos?
Yeah, John, tell us.
Petaluma's done some really awesome things.
Uh,
Um, is John gonna?
Do you want me to step in on this?
They asked you a direct question. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So here in Petaluma, so I'm part of the progressive movement here. We've had lots of No King Day protests going on weekly. So as I said, we do have lots of things going on. We're trying to move forward. Your concepts here are quite right on. I believe in all this. And so I talk about these things pretty regularly at the council meetings. We do have a large part of our population is sort of like agreeing, but there's the resistance that everyone's talking about. It's that undercurrent that not to be able to say the capitalism, consumerism, the individual rights. How dare you make me do something else? Ride a bike? You want me to ride a bike? Really? So we're doing bike lanes, and we're hitting huge resistance now in a couple of our streets, especially in an affluent street, D Street downtown. We took away parking on one side of the road and put in two bike lanes, and it was much safer. However, they're going, how dare you? I have to walk 2 blocks to get to my car now every day. How dare you? And so there's a huge movement. Now we have folks that are coming back to us, and they're actually going to recall at least one of our council members, is what the plan is right now. So the battle is really tough. Um, and then mentioning we've got to talk about the main things right up front. I'm talking about getting out of your cars and getting into your bicycles. And there's a whole, I also support micro mobility. There's a whole lot of called gap vehicles and pods for handicapped. So I'm pushing, we're in the ATP plan, active transportation plan we just did. There's a huge amount of effort to get people on into active transport and public transport, both. So that's working. We're getting more people. A lot more is happening here. And so we have a movement going on, but we just hit a wall. We also tried to add in a hotel, a 5-star, 6-story hotel in our historic downtown. And the backlash was so huge, they actually came out with a referendum, which got passed, and also a lawsuit, which we had to back down entirely. So we're trying to do a combination, economy plus, go to add housing, affordable housing, do all this. It's sort of working here, but it is right now we're at a cusp. And so anyway, what you're promoting here is pretty radical. I actually believe it myself. So, but I got to be careful about how far I go in what I say. But at least there's traction here. But we have a upscale population. And here's the other thing part that's happening here in California. Between the wildfires and the insurance, the costs of insurance are skyrocketing all over the U.S. If when insurance companies get broke, start going broke, and then we're going to see an economy collapse within 5 to 10 years entirely, that's when people are going to go, oh, we better do something about this. So it's coming, and it's coming fast. So I think the wake up calls are starting to happen. Here in the US, we're getting more hurricanes, more tornadoes than anywhere else in the world, pretty much. And the droughts and wildfires equal or more than just about anywhere else. But we're the leaders of consumerism. We'll, so people are waking up. But as you said, these people are scared, and they're moving toward Trump and going, okay, this is where we need to go to stay safe for my lifetime. And we keep saying, hey, it's our kids that are important, and people keep forgetting. Anyway, so that's my take on it at the moment, but I am moving forward with some hope, and we have Cool Petaluma here, we have Rebuild, we have Daily Acts, we have Relief, we have Petaluma Wetlands, we have Friends of Petaluma River, huge nonprofits roundtable that's getting together and this week, and talking about how we can organize the community to keep this movement going. So that's an update of Petaluma here.
Amazing.
I'm talking to
jumping
myself
in
here.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Francisca. Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
thanks for sharing the view from the trenches, John. I'm just wondering if we're even here in California facing such an uphill struggle, and not even inland, but here in the more progressive communities, it is definitely hard. And when you mentioned, Steve, earlier that famous 3.5% of a population to gain critical mass, I was thinking, well, even if we had our cities or even all of California on board, if as long as there are federal headwinds of the types that we're having right now, and I'm not going into details, we all know how awful it is, but how far can we really change it? And I'm thinking of the kind of systems scale of Donella Meadows, where really we shouldn't just try to think about recycling or bike paths or all that. Even though all of those elements are important, we also need to really change the system. And I guess that's, or I know that this is really also what degrowth is trying to address. The only thing that kind of gives me a little bit of hope is research such as that recent study by Hickel and others that really said we really only would need 30% of the resources and energy that we're currently using for everybody on the planet, 8.5 billion people, to have a decent standard of living. And that doesn't mean that the North has to all go down to the level of the global South, but that everybody gets to a normal level. And even here in the North, there are such discrepancies that even if we just get the top 1 to 5% to change their exorbitant lifestyles, that could help. But again, it's a mindset shift, and that's so difficult. And I wonder, kind of, Steve, what your thoughts are on getting past that hurdle.
Well, it was thought-provoking. John was saying that insurance was going to drive the change. I was like, oh, what an interesting catalyst to bring reality about. Really a hard sell. And, even on some of like the cool block programs, like, there's 36 houses on my block. Everybody's pretty green, but everybody's so busy at different stages in their life. It's not like you can actually sort of mobilize from scratch to do something really innovative just because people have so many different focuses, but I always thought, well, can't we like find some new apartment complex that is just opening and just pick people that are gonna, adopt a specific program and really try to push the envelope on how green you can go and changing your behavior. So how do you manufacture the scale of 10, 100, or 1,000 people who live adjacent and are not out in rural areas, but are actually in urban areas, but highly populated places?
Yeah, I'll give you two suggestions. Well, one thing that's happening right now that I'm doing is there's the book called Abundance. Ezra Klein is written it. At least gives it a philosophical base that sort of provides an opportunity that we need to shift toward a positive message, bringing in the community to make all this happen. The other thing, we also have an urban chat and know before you grow type group. And we've brought in folks that, like from Arizona, there's a community that was built that's carless. So, and there was more than 1,000 people on the waiting list to get into this program of this large complex that they built down there. So there is a movement, but we are, as like our revolution and other revolutions, the French Revolution, it always gets down to when people finally are suffering so much, there's a crisis that's happening, and that's when real transition can happen. Right now, because we're so successful, still using all the oil, and people are very comfortable and luxuriously living, and we still have, the airlines are still flying more people than ever. So until we actually have a real disasters happening, whereas a class 6 tornado comes through along with a class 6 hurricane comes through and just devastates entire cities, that's when people are going, oh, maybe we need to do something now. And that is the opportunity, but we need to be ready for that opportunity when these things happen. I think Canada is sort of getting ready with all the wildfires. Australia's had the wildfires. They're sort of getting ready. China already has a plan to dominate the world. And the communism that they're supporting and their style of communism, which is actually bring everybody up from a poverty level, which they have done, actually is working over there right now. And they've got nuclear plants, solar. They're doing all sorts of things for the entire economy, trying to bring everybody up to at least a low middle class level. And they're being very successful at it right now. So in the long term, they're going to win out. And so the world's going to convert eventually to that system after we have a collapse of the entire economy globally. That's my prediction right now. So, but in the meantime, we need to all work really hard to get everybody ready for that and have this all in place. So that's where I'm at. I see Armando shaking his
Thank you.
head. Yeah, so just chime
Any
in
more
there.
questions?
Yeah, we can be fully in discussion right now. I think that would be the best. Um, yeah, I'm like, yeah. I guess for me, like personally, I was really kind of shocked when I realized that the main sustainability discourse I had absorbed was like lying about kind of the fundamentals of what sustainability requires. And then when I was out there in Barcelona, I got the impression, like from some of the academics, that like this debate has been settled, whether degrowth is the best option, if not only option, in terms of like science and whatnot. And so I don't know if everyone will operate the way that my mind does, but once that was like communicated and I kind of understood and believed in that, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's what it is then. And I feel like I don't know how much value like that understanding would, how much political power that understanding would have, but I kind of feel like as an early step, I don't know if the rest of the environmental movement or organizational infrastructure has been informed in California. Just like on a movement level, I kind of feel like we need to do the like ringing the bell to like degrowth is the empirical option, and kind of get the first or the low-hanging fruit of like people involved, I guess. But that whole like they're trying to recall the people for putting in bike lanes or the hotel or whatever like that for me is just like the massive blocker is that like people are rigid and they don't want change, whether it's progressive change, regressive change. They'll go for regressive change if it provides security. So it's like, how do we? But that, I feel like I don't know. I feel like with Zoran Mamdani, the New York mayor, like he's campaigning on affordability,
Yep.
and likewise, like when you go deep into like the degrowth policies and how much they could radically improve quality of life and health outcomes and just reduce the economic pressure people are suffering from in California. I feel like that is, it could be extremely popular politically, but then there's still this massive resistance that it'll, because there's not only the like the locals who will resist on the local level, there's also like just all the money in California, which is just I'm just like I don't know, I don't know how to get around that. Uh,
Yeah, John Sonam has just joined us. Maybe let's hear from him.
Thank
Sure,
you.
John, go ahead.
Yeah, I sure do have a lot to say, but I really don't have any kind of authoritative opinion, I guess. It's I've been living in a reality where I uh, have been dealing with the world's issues from the standpoint of conversion of all our energy sources to usable form is at its state of the art. Now, I understand we're coming online with a lot of alternatives right now, but nonetheless, the energy available for our transition, not just to a more sustainable future, but to a less intrusive present, um, is limited. It's like Einstein said, everything is energy, and whether we convert it to something usable like consumer products, but even a lot of that is just waste. Um, or AI, God, those data processing. I've been fighting this stuff too for a while. Those processing things. What an insane absurdity of the human condition. Is it anything that requires that much energy to function? But uh, the uh, the budget we're all living in is constrained, and if we call ourselves Christian, we call ourselves whatever, and we're not living by the golden rule, we're just hypocrites. So I really think that it's going to take converting at a spiritual level. I don't want to say religion because that's uh, so uh, twisted anymore with fundamentalists. Uh, but at a spiritual level, to everyone living by the golden rule, and that requires awareness of others, even to the level that you are aware of others, because not everyone's aware of everything. I mean, uh, some of us are only. I know a lot of megas right in my compound or in my neighborhood that can't see past the end of their nose, and the end, ultimately that's what it is. It's seeing beyond yourself that recognizes that our shared future, our value in the future, our fulfillment personally, individually, can only be attained if we live by the golden rule. Um, but like I said, not much when it comes to the detailed contribution. I understand, and I don't have uh, any kind of engineering or I just have an awareness that's pretty um, multidisciplinary, I guess you could say. A lot of science and math, my background, which is essentially engineering. A lot of psychological or social science. A lot of um, uh, uh, what do you call biological science that I can allows me to understand the implications of everything to everything else. And that's what it is ultimately. We're all living in one system, this planet. So what we do impacts everything else on this planet or in this planet. Even our, and by that way, the way we think is impacted by everything else too, our imaginations. Um, but like I said, I don't have much to contribute when it comes to details. I'm sorry. Sure, it's good um, information. I like that. Thanks for Armando. Thanks for sending me that link on Steve's presentation.
Sure, yeah.
Thanks, you
Jack.
guys.
Thank you. Jack, you had a question?
Well,
You're
just
muted.
yeah, just to contribute to the conversation here, there's like a wealth of very interesting and provocative thoughts. Steve, I think that was really great. You know, you had a lot to say, and I'm trying to sort it out in my head. One thing is that I have been talking to Armando because he's been introducing this topic, and he kind of turned me on to a number of resources. And I just read Jason Hickel's book about degrowth. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it has, again, it has so many ideas in it. But one that really struck me is the concept of a steady state economy. And that had two aspects:
Yeah.
never extract more than ecosystems can regenerate, and never waste or pollute more than ecosystems can safely absorb. If we could just put limits on capitalism, I don't know, that's a big if, but if, we could just control the corporations and not allow them to, destroy the earth the way they're doing. Just say, no, you can't do that. If we were able to actually have a people's government that could control them, and I think you may be right, John, that it's going to take some kind of crisis to make that happen. But I just wanted to throw that out as an idea that I had recently read that I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm like, I still would love to study the steady state stuff more on its own because, yeah, it's like degrowth to the steady state, but I still haven't heard like a coherent framing on like what size of an economy is sustainable at a steady state because there's still like resource use, extraction, recycling, um, entropy at that level. Uh, but it definitely makes a lot more sense. It's a very seductive meme. And I know there's like a lot of research, and this one guy dedicated his life to it here in the States, but I haven't dug into his work yet. Um, yeah.
Wow.
I'm also
Well,
real interested in all the comments about China. I've been following it a lot. And this year, China has added 500, and in the first half of the year, 590 gigawatts of solar and wind. I mean, just to put that in perspective, California is like 70 gigawatts total power. I mean, they are going so incredibly at the rate they're going, they will be 100% clean energy within 5 or 10 years. Um, Now, whether they can keep that pace up or not, I don't know. The other thing is that all of that part of the world, China, India, Indonesia, Japan, etc. The main mode of transportation is two-wheelers, and most of these are now electric. So it's like kind of like what we want in the Bay Area is we want people, getting around on two-wheelers as opposed to having everybody drive around in a car. And that's what those countries in India and everybody else is already doing. So I just think that's pretty cool. And it gives me hope that the main population center of the world is centered in that part of Asia. That's like half the population of the world is right there in those countries. And if they're doing it, and if they're going to solve these problems and get rid of the oil habit, that's a big plus.
There's a couple opportunities. I don't know if you live near San Francisco, but I got invited to the Micromobility Conference, which is being held by, there's a whole international group, but it's run out of here by the US, with all of the scooters and bikes and electrifications going on around the world, and they are tracking everything around the world. But there's a big conference, an annual conference happening in San Francisco in January, early on. So if you want to go to that, there's a couple other groups I'm part of that. This is a conversation that we're having. And the one of them is called Climate Restoration, which is a national group. It's a chapter here in San Francisco. And they are talking about the natural, there's agricultural grabbing of regenerative ag type things that is possible, that is actually being pushed a lot. There's also ocean fertilization with iron that might help take out a lot of CO2 if we have a lot of the algae growth, that even in just 0.1% of the ocean only needs to be fertilized to actually absorb a huge amount of carbon. So there are folks that are working. There's lots of positive things going on. There's several groups just like you are talking right now. So you're like, I just joined this group because, oh, okay, here's another group that we can talk to, where we're getting agreement. So I think it is happening. I see lots of hope. I just joined the Abundance Network of Electeds. And so that's a new group of folks that are going to follow after the Abundance book. Lots of county and city prior folks have decided to join, and they're going to help out by mentoring and helping all the current city council members and county supervisors and make things happen locally, following up that, hey, let's spread the wealth, and it's all of us, like was said earlier. We could all be living with half the resources being used now in the rest of the world. If we shared and did everything right, we'd be in a really good shape. And we just have to have this mentality and shift our whole thinking process here. The US, what we've shifted throughout the whole world, our videos, what we produce, our propaganda that we spread out is live like us, please, because we are living great. And so, anyway, but I do see lots of hope. So that's why I'm here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. We got to keep hope alive, right? Regardless. So,
I'm curious, did you read that Abundance book by Ezra? Because I only watched his videos, and I understood he was making the point about how it's just too expensive to build here, and just projects are too expensive, and it just like kind of is a development challenge. But I have heard his comment. He's like very anti-degrowth, which like a lot of kind of mainstream adjacent people. And I've only heard him give kind of like straw man arguments for why it's bad. Um, because yeah, I think he's like very much still kind of in this we can yeah, I didn't understand in his thinking that he's like grappled with like actual sustainability materially, not just energy and climate wise. Um, and this kind of like whole international justice dimension of like how capitalism requires imperialism, how our kind of like Bay Area lifestyle kind of implicitly benefits and relies on taking more than the fair share of the Earth's resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd be curious.
Yeah, so my interpretation of it is a little bit different. That we can, if we grow properly, and as I said, I think he would incorporate everything that's being said here. However, we have to still provide some housing for everybody, but we can provide it with less regulations and smaller dwellings and do things. So there's lots of things we could do to help support, but we've got to give the message we can give everybody housing. But it may not be what our four bedroom, 3 bath mansions. We're gonna have to do something very different, and we have to deregulate so that we can make more of these in all sorts of neighborhoods. So there is and he's pro balancing of using enough growth, but if you do it right, we can get to what this group is talking about.
What do you think of that, Steve? Oh, Sash, Carol, you haven't chimed in
that
yet.
was my question.
I think Carol's frozen.
Steve, did you want to say anything about all that?
Oh, no, I thought we were going to Carol.
I'm just
Oh, I'm sorry, Carol.
I'm just
Did you have a
listening.
Oh, okay. Steve, did you want to comment on the what was just said?
Yeah, right. I'm skeptical that Ezra Klein can capitalism our way out of this. And but I mean, the reformed version of FERC that he's talking about is really as a step ahead. It's great. I don't think it's sufficient. And he interviewed Kim Stanley Robinson about the book Ministry for the Future, and he said this is the greatest book of the year, and all policymakers have to read this. And then I thought that he didn't learn from that when he wrote his abundance book with Derek Thompson. I thought that Kim Stanley Robinson and Davis has got some big picture insights that Ezra forgot.
Yeah, Franziska, who was here earlier, she did the California donut. And according to their research, the California is like 283% over its ecological budget. Or I can't remember. It's either it's like our own resources or an overshoot of like global resource use. But basically like we're already in overshoot in California. So that means like growing our way into abundance is doesn't have like an empirical basis. I would assume, although I could get my thinking, but like the reason why I like the degrowth specifically is because they say let's just go directly to ecological and social well-being and secure everyone's basic needs and cut the fluff out of the economy, cut all the stuff that doesn't contribute to that. And so you're like, you actually have to do some selection, like what kind of economic activity is important, what like provides for human and social well-being or human ecological well-being, what just makes certain people rich, um, and is otherwise unnecessary, or like what is just like, unnecessary consumption and production to that goal. And so I feel like when I hear these narratives about any kind of like growth dependency, I'm like, but yeah, if we're not grasping with just the sustainability problem and then like the kind of excess activity that our kind of economy encourages, then I'm just kind of like, well, we kind of missed the point there. But we don't have to go super in on Ezra Klein, and John, you don't have to be in a position to defend that. But I was just curious because I was kind of like excited about this idea of abundance, but then when I like was going into this stuff, I was like, oh no, this is maybe not right all the way. Carol, you're talking, but you're mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be talking and I didn't mean to be
I
unmuted.
was talking to Carol.
I was on mute. I want to read that book by Kim Stanley Robinson.
And by the way, it's a poorly written book
Oh,
because he has to have these chapters that are just sort of exposition or whatever, and talk about a different technology. So he's like, this was the best way that I could convey this really comprehensive thing. But it's not like one of my past books that actually had a really tight narrative and better character development and stuff. So like UC Santa Barbara is one of the places where some professors sneak in some degrowthy education, but they have to go through it, make it a continuing education course because you couldn't get a department head to approve of it. But in freshman English, they have 1,000 students read Ministry for the Future, which is a very subversive thing.
Don't tell Trump.
I don't know, have probably you, absolutely, John. I don't know about you, Steve, or the rest of the gang, but you, Jack, like, because I don't know, as I've been like, I kind of tuned out of like local politics the last like 5 years, but I did, I understand that California is making a lot of progress on like renewable energy and other stuff, but one of the things I talk about in the degrowth literature is not just energy use, but material use, and that there's these other, and that like switching to renewables doesn't necessarily solve the material use problem. Actually, that's a tangent. Scratch that. I would just get rid of that whole part. I'm like, how is actually sustainability doing in California and in the Bay Area? And because I don't know, I'm kind of like assume that like the need to maintain political, like not to get recalled, combined with the need to kind of just like build on top of the status quo makes like true sustainability kind of impossible, and that like so we just kind of do what we can without challenging like deeper structures. But I haven't like been following like what kind of initiatives or what things
Well,
people are proposing. So I'd be curious. Yeah.
let me talk a little bit about the Oakland airport expansion. we've been fighting against that. But it was like the Port Commission voted unanimously to build a new terminal at the airport, and it's like there's no electric planes out there. There's no alternatives they're all, very, very polluting for the neighborhood as well as concentrating greenhouse gases. So the strategy is just to try to talk about the health impacts because of all the pollution. Ultrafine particles are a big problem with airplanes, and the fact that there actually isn't any growth of the airport passengers in the last 10 years. They still haven't recovered from pre-COVID. And
Wow.
people are using Zoom to go instead of driving down to flying down to LA for business meetings.
Crazy. So then why do they need an expansion?
Right. So that's kind of where the level of argument is. But if there were a real big demand, we'd be dead because that economic argument seems to be the most powerful. And we did elect Barbara Lee, who's definitely a person that we can talk to and is sympathetic to community health and social justice and all that kind of thing. But economic development is a very powerful part of the city's political life. And so you're just asking, where do we stand? And I think, John, you were talking about Petaluma has that same dynamic. I mean, it's not like we would win this argument about the airport just by arguing the degrowth side. Well, we should get rid of, everybody should stop flying, that's not going to win that argument. But, looking at the actual statistics and looking at the health impacts, we have a fighting chance, although it's a pretty weak one. We didn't get any votes on the environmental impact report on the Port Commission, even though we had a big demonstration and lots of people turned out, a lot of excellent speakers, but that's just a little glimpse of where the politics are.
And the Oakland airport is part of the whole um they're shipping
Sending weapons to
bombs and
yeah.
weapons and equipment. So that's really bad too. There's a big um press conference there tomorrow at 10 a.m. Oakland Airport.
Yeah,
Take
this
part. But
is something, it's a new development. We didn't know about this a year ago. So this is something that
no,
and it's very interesting. So we'll try to make that point too, that's a terrible thing that the Oakland airport shouldn't be doing.
yeah. I mean, where are they going to expand to? It's all landfill over there anyway, right? It's like there's no land. It's just going to make a um. I used to be on the Oakland Noise Council, Oakland Airport Noise Forum, I guess it's called. And, nobody that lives anywhere near the airport was happy with the noise, the pollution, the dust, the changing of flight paths and all those things. Um, so yeah, we gotta speak up and speak loud. But this has been really very, very informative and interesting, and I have a lot of questions which I didn't really quite get them written down in my head yet, but I'm gonna try to have some ready for Friday, but because I'm sure I can still ask those questions. But yeah, I mean, well, one of the questions is like we gotta eliminate like all these influences for the politics. That's one. And also wars have to be eliminated. That would save the planet so much money and time and lives. That would be amazing. So, and also John Shribs, I think I've seen you, or do you go to the network of elected officials and staff meetings?
Well, I've been to a couple of sessions there. Um, so, uh, yeah, so I'm pretty active in a lot of different webinars that I pass one to the other. So yeah, we may have crossed paths a few times. Yes. So
Yeah, I remember seeing you there actually. So nice to see you again. I just realized that. So we're almost at time, and I think this has been really great. I've
I have
learned
another
so
question.
much. Pardon, Mondo?
I have a question for Steve.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, what is Degrow California doing? What's that little group
Oh, that's a good question.
in there? What's going on over there?
Oh yes, it's about kind of 4 roughly in Northern California and 4 roughly in Southern California. And we're sort of a little bit bureaucratic in terms of it takes us a while to build a consensus to do things or work on our educational version of our slides and but one of our members is also part of donut economics, and he seems to, I don't know, more stuff happens with donut economics, I think, than with Degrowth California.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Have you talked to a lot elected officials? Well, you got one here.
So he doesn't have to talk to me. I already agree.
I mean, I
I
spent
was
a
just wondering if you're working with them at all to get them on the degrowth path.
but I spent a lot of time on sustainable transportation policy and schlepping up to Sacramento and trying to enact non-incremental policy. And
Yeah.
I had this disconnect, and so it took me a while to sort of figure it out. So, but I expected more rationality, and that uh, when you get in a position of responsibility, then you do what we call backcasting. You work backwards from where you need to be, and then you have milestones every year to hit that. And
Mm.
so in sustainable transportation, yeah, I didn't think there was an attempt to ask the right questions, and even push people to make trade-offs on stuff. And seeing that generally our political system uh, elected incrementalists and staff that was staff and nonprofits are amazingly smart, were incrementalists, and just that's sort of the way of the world.
Yeah, fair.
Fair. All
I
right,
feel
we
like
have a new person that just joined. Hi, David.
Hello, sorry for a late arrival. I was thinking it was later than it was.
That's okay. We pretty much finished all the rest of the presentation, and we were just asking questions if you had any, if you know, I don't know what you know about degrowth, but
Not a lot. The word itself seems a bit cryptic to me, and maybe the language of degrowth could be explained. It's a novice question, but how degrowth as a word and as a concept was arrived at uh, in comparison to other possible words or language or approaches.
that's a good question.
I had dinner with one of the 3 co-authors of the Future is Degrowth book and listened to him on a podcast. And so there was discussion of, hey, degrowth is kind of negative, it's kind of bad framing. And this is Aaron, last name starts with V. And he's like, no, I really like it. It's like really provocative. It's like, we're in here to stick it to people. And then just David, just for your information, he was the one who taught me, it's a little bit flip, but the definition of degrowth is luxury communism with austerity for the rich.
Hmm.
I remember reading that on one of the
Yeah, it started in France. It's called Décroissance, and it's like a whole movement, and then eventually made its way into English. And basically, the long story short is in the United States, we are in a capitalist society, which is structurally dependent on economic growth, and
yeah.
we're educated that economic growth through more or less trickle down benefits is how we're able to provide enough for everyone, and how people's quality of life will be improved through access to like goods and services. And it turns out that that is a profound lie, actually. that you don't need economic growth to provide for people's basic needs. But because capitalism entrenches inequality is kind of built into our economic system, you need you need stories that explain the inequality. And so that's like meritocracy, that's racism, that's like we just need more growth and then eventually you'll get enough. But it turns out there is no empirical scientific foundation to the idea that we can grow ourselves into sustainability because the rate at which economic growth is decoupling from energy and material use is not sufficient to achieve sustainability in any survivable timeline. So what we're left with in that point is to actually voluntarily scale back the global economy to sustainable levels. And the countries who are in overshoot, who are consuming more resources than the earth can handle, and who are perpetuating a system of unequal access to the benefits of that economic production. It's basically primarily the Western countries who have consumed the historical energy, climate, and material budget. And so it's Western countries that are in a position where they need to degrow for sustainability reasons, in addition to social justice reasons. And so what degrowth as a term is saying is that we need to reverse the direction of growth. We actually need to degrow. But that's really triggering for a lot of people because we're educated that we need economic growth for social benefits. But that's actually not true. You can just provide social benefits directly. There's like one research that someone earlier pointed out. One of the main researchers, Jason Hickel, did a study using an academic framework on universal basic provisioning. It's basically like if everyone had enough, they have these academic frameworks for enough. And they found that if we could provide for all 8.5 billion people in the world at a third of the size of the economy. So if the economy was exclusively concerned with meeting people's basic needs, you wouldn't need 2/3 of it. 2/3 of it is excess of meeting people's needs. And so what degrowth is advocating for is because we're in an climate emergency, a planetary emergency, we have extreme inequality. We actually need to shift the goal and the system of the economy from one that is dependent on growth to one that directly is designed to meet social and ecological needs and well-being.
Good explanations, both. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, we're at our time, and that was, we didn't give a full disclosure, but I am Armando's mom. So,
I was just going to ask
yeah, he makes his mama proud. I'll say
Yeah, fun
that.
fact, actually, that last resolution I wrote for you while you were in office actually advocated for all of this. I was just rereading it the other day, and it advocated that Berkeley adopt the donut, that the Bay Area as a whole and Berkeley get within planetary limits, that we like go through a process of like identifying what our fair share is, that we like also shift to like bioregional governance in some way. It was like all in there, but mom lost her
Yeah.
re-election, the political power. They were like, can't give her any more wins, so they like shut it down.
No.
Yeah, we tried to do this in
But
2020.
yes, we did, and that was before you went to study degrowth.
Yeah,
So
before I knew what
you were ahead.
degrowth.
All right, Lynette, you have a question, and then we're gonna close out.
No, I just wanted to say that I have to make full disclosure. I'm a proud auntie. I'm Cheryl's sister. I'm very proud auntie.
That's true.
I didn't hear you said that.
She's my sister. This is true.
Yeah, and I said I'm a proud auntie of Armando.
Yeah, on Friday we will have a couple of the researchers from Barcelona who are presenting. So they'll be giving some pretty cool presentations, one of which is on policy perceptions of degrowth policies. Academic research they did, I think on the United States, could be the UK, I'm not sure. But it'll be a more technical deep dive, I hope. But yeah, Steve, your presentation was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so stay tuned, everyone. Join in on Friday and also Saturday if you're around. We're going to have a bio blitz, at Tilden Nature Area at 9 a.m. to noon. And we'll be going around with naturalists, breaking into groups, walking around, taking photos, and then uploading them into iNaturalist and hearing from the naturalists because we're working with this is a CEMTF in East Bay Regional Parks. So they'll have 3 people from the parks walking us around, plus a couple other volunteers. And so that should be fun. There'll be snacks and pizza afterwards. And it's 9 a.m. to noon. And hope to see you Friday and Saturday if you're available. But thank you so much, Steve. That was amazing. We're very nice to meet you and hope to stay in touch. And yes, we have to degrowth the Bay Area and beyond. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. And thank you, Jack and Karina. And Karina, you've been a little quiet. Did you have any questions before? You got 1 minute if you do.
No, thank you very much. And I really enjoyed the conversation and the exchange. Thank you.
And I just want to say,
All
Steve,
right.
it's great to see you. I haven't seen you for many years,
I
but
know, right?
it's been a while. So nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, Jack.
Yeah.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah, Jack was excited when when I gave him your name. So, yay. It's good to make the connections again. So that's great. And good to see everyone and we hope to see you Friday. So have a
Thank you.
blessed night and see you Friday. And thank you, David, for being here too. Have a blessed day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
You
you all.
too. Bye bye.
Bye.